You probably picture it like this: a dozen screaming cavemen, spears raised, charging a mammoth head-on. Actually, that is almost certainly not how it happened, and if anyone had tried it that way, they would have died. The real answer is honestly far more impressive than the version in the movies. Let's start with what these people were actually up against. A woolly mammoth stood around 3 meters at the shoulder and weighed somewhere in the range of 6 tons. Its tusks could reach 4 meters, curved, heavy, and capable of throwing a human body a distance you don't want to think about. It had a thick layer of fat under a dense double coat of hair. It lived in herds, and crucially, it was not slow. Elephants today, which are close relatives, can charge at around 25 miles an hour. You cannot outrun that. You cannot climb away from it because there are barely any trees on the open mammoth steppe. And you certainly cannot fight it with your hands. Now add the second problem, which is the one people usually forget. The environment itself was trying to kill you. During the coldest stretch of the last ice age, roughly 26 to 19,000 years ago, huge ice sheets sat on top of northern Europe, Asia, and North America. The land was open, flat, and wind-scoured. Wood was scarce. Winter temperatures could drop far enough that exposed skin was in trouble in minutes. So the question isn't just how do you kill a mammoth? It's how do you kill a mammoth while also not freezing, while also carrying everything you own, while also feeding 30 people who are counting on you? The first answer is that you almost certainly didn't fight it in the open. Archaeologists and anthropologists studying how modern-day people hunt very large animals have found the same pattern over and over. You use the landscape, not your strength. In practice, that meant driving animals toward places where their size stopped being an advantage. Bogs and soft marshy ground, where a 6-ton animal sinks and a 150-pound human doesn't. Riverbanks and steep cuts where the footing is bad. Narrow passes between rock. There is a well-known site in eastern France near a tall limestone outcrop where hunters used fire and coordinated movement to push whole herds of horses and reindeer into a natural trap. Not once, but repeatedly across tens of thousands of years. The same principle scales up. You don't beat the animal, you let the ground beat it, and you wait. The second answer is that they went after the ones they could actually take. This is the part that gets left out of every cave painting-inspired illustration. Hunting is not about heroism, it's about arithmetic. A healthy adult bull mammoth in the middle of a herd is essentially untouchable. A juvenile that has drifted away from the group, an old animal moving slowly, or one already weakened by a bad winter is a completely different proposition. Analysis of the mammoth remains at some major sites suggests hunters were not taking a random sample of the population, which is exactly what you'd expect if they were choosing carefully rather than charging whatever they saw. The third answer is the technology, and it's more sophisticated than it looks. By around 400,000 years ago, humans in Germany were making the Schöningen spears. Wooden throwing spears, carefully shaped, weighted toward the front like a modern javelin. That is not a sharpened stick, that is engineering. Later hunters added stone points and then something genuinely clever, the spear thrower, sometimes called an atlatl. It's a simple, hooked stick that acts as an extension of your arm, and it roughly doubles the velocity and range of a thrown spear. It lets you put a projectile into a large animal from a distance where the animal could not immediately reach you. Against something that outweighs you 40 times over, distance isn't a luxury. Distance is the entire strategy. None of that works alone, though. A single hunter with a perfect spear and a perfect plan is still one person against 6 tons. What actually made it possible was that humans could do something no other predator on that landscape could. Agree on a plan in advance, and then execute different parts of it separately. One group moves the herd. One group waits at the trap. Someone watches the wind so the animals don't catch a scent early. Wolves hunt in packs, but wolves are running instinct. Humans were running a strategy that had been discussed the night before, around a fire, in language, and could be adjusted mid-hunt if something went wrong. And there's a fourth answer that has nothing to do with hunting at all: patience. A mammoth that has been wounded doesn't fall over. It walks. It keeps walking, sometimes for hours, sometimes into the next day. So you follow it. You read the tracks, the blood, the disturbed ground. You stay close enough to keep pressure on it and far enough that it can't turn and end you. This is the same persistence hunting logic humans have used on every continent, just applied to something enormous. You are not stronger. You are not faster. You are simply willing to keep going longer than the animal can. Now, here's the part that changes how you think about this whole thing. When they finally brought one down, the meat was almost the least interesting part of what they got. Out on the open steppe in what is now Ukraine and Russia, there were no caves to shelter in and almost no wood to build with. So people built houses out of mammoth bones. At a site called Mezhyrich, archaeologists found round dwellings constructed almost entirely from mammoth skeletons. Skulls and heavy leg bones set into the ground as a foundation, ribs and tusks curving upward to form the frame, hundreds of bones in a single structure. They were sunk partway into the earth and packed with hides, moss, and soil, which held heat well enough to keep an entire family warm. Some of these are around 18,000 years old, right in the worst of the Ice Age, and the sites show signs of being used and rebuilt over hundreds of years. Think about what that actually means. The most dangerous animal on the landscape became the building material for the thing that kept you alive at night. That's not just hunting. That's a full economy built around a single species. And it went further than architecture. Fat was burned as fuel where firewood didn't exist. Hides became clothing and shelter walls. Ivory was carved into tools, beads, figurines, and, critically, sewing needles. That last one matters more than it sounds. A needle turns a loose hide thrown over your shoulders into a fitted, sealed garment with closed cuffs and layered seams, and in an environment like that, the difference between a blanket and a coat is the difference between surviving the season and not. So step back and look at what these people actually did. They lived alongside the largest land animal in their world, an animal that could kill any of them in a second, and instead of avoiding it, they organized their entire existence around it. They studied its behavior. They learned which individuals were vulnerable and which were not. They shaped the land, the timing, and their own tools to turn an impossible target into a manageable one. And then they used every part of it, down to the bones holding up the roof over their children. Here's the uncomfortable ending, though. It worked too well. Mammoths disappeared from most of their range around 10,000 years ago. There is still real debate about how much of that was human hunting and how much was the climate warming and the mammoth steppe shrinking beneath them. And the honest answer is that it was probably both, feeding into each other. But the pattern across continents is hard to ignore. Humans arrive, and within a few thousand years the largest animals are gone. The last small population held out on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean until roughly 4,000 years ago. That's after the pyramids at Giza were built. Somewhere in Egypt, people were quarrying stone blocks while, far to the north, the last mammoths on Earth were still alive, and nobody knew. So how did ancient humans survive alongside mammoths? They didn't survive alongside them exactly. They survived by studying them, outlasting them, and eventually building their homes out of them. Every advantage the mammoth had, size, strength, insulation, was a fixed thing it was born with and could never change. Every advantage we had, we invented, taught to someone else, and improved on the next time. That's the whole story of our species compressed into one animal. We were never the strongest thing on the landscape. We were just the only thing that could take what killed us and turn it into a roof.